Hello and welcome to the Ellen Made Book Club. Today I'm doing the Mid-Year Freakout Tag. This year I decided to switch up the questions a little bit. Most of them I think I did last year as well, but then I saw Nicky at my Messy Bookshelf do this tag, and she had sort of compiled a list of a bunch of questions from different versions of this tag, and so I just stole that. I took some questions off and just kept the ones that I wanted to answer and talk about. I feel like this might be a long one, so let's just get started. So the first category is general reflection, and the first question is, how many books have you read so far this year? Are you ahead, behind, or on track with your reading goal? I have a bunch of different reading goals this year, but the numerical one is 52 books. So that would mean one book a week, because I read 51 last year and I would like to hit that even 52. And so far I've read 27 books. So Goodreads tells me I am 3 books ahead. Question number 2, have your reading habits changed this year? Format, genre, frequency. I would say a higher percentage of the books that I'm reading are audiobooks, which is great. And I also think that I am mood reading a little bit more, or I am like finding myself wanting to mood read more and be a bit more in control of the books that I choose to pick up and not have it so randomized every single month with the TBR jar. I'm still figuring that out, but that's just, something that I have noticed. Question number 3, what's one unexpected trend you've noticed in your reading? I'm not sure I would say it's unexpected, because I feel like it's a very typical thing for me to be doing, but what I've noticed is that I'm trying to find the balance still between reading sort of for exploration and self-development, and reading diversely on the one hand, and on the other hand reading for entertainment and just like for the fun of it, because the diversity book bingo that I'm doing this year is something that I still feel very strongly about, and even if I don't have like the bingo, that's just a challenge to help me keep on track, or like keep focus, but like I do want to read more diversely. But I have found that a lot of the books that I have picked out in order to read more diversely are on very serious topics, either like social issues, or they are nonfiction, or, they're just a little bit more dense to get through and not necessarily very entertaining, even though they might be once you get into it, but like the more serious they are, the more resistance I have to even pick them up. So I have been trying to be more mindful to find books that are both, that are entertaining and like books that I have fun with reading, but that also incorporate some kind of diversity, whether it's written by an author from, a different part of the world than I'm used to reading from, or there's representation from a certain minority group, which there are lots of. I just noticed that I'm wanting to combine those two a little bit better, so that I'm not reading either diversely and seriously or having fun, because they should come together. The next section is highlights and favorites, and the first question on that is the favorite book you've read so far this year. So for this one I have 2. The first one is Bunny by Mona Awad, which I have talked about before a lot, and yeah, I really enjoyed this one. And the other one is Pet by Catherine Chidgey, which was a very anticipated read of mine. And there's a bit of a common theme in that we're following a female main character in a school setting, and people are weird and kind of mean, and there's some brutality involved. And so, sensing a theme here. A book that pleasantly surprised you. And I talked about this book in my quarterly check-in as well, but I think my answer is the same, and that is Disability Visibility by Alice Wong, or edited by Alice Wong. It's an anthology of essays, and I think I will come back to that book a little bit later in this video as well. A book that lived up to the hype. I think for this one I would say Nesting by Roisin O'Donnell. I had heard a lot of hype around that book. It was nominated for the Women's Prize, and I just heard it being mentioned as like a really fantastic book, and I just would have to agree. I thought it was great. And I would also have to say My Friends by Fredrik Backman, which I haven't really heard a lot of people talking about having read it, but it's a release that has been very anticipated by a lot of people who love Backman as an author and, you know, his books. So I feel like there has been a lot of anticipation and a lot of hype around, you know, the book in that sense, but it hasn't been out for very long yet. So I feel like I feel like the hype is still sort of building. I don't know. We'll see. I loved it. A favorite reread. I think this is the only book that I have reread this year, so not a lot of options, but it is still one of my favorite books of all time, and that is Ronja Rövardotter by Astrid Lindgren, Ronja the Robber's Daughter in English. It's a children's book, and it's fantastic, and I haven't read it as an adult until now, but I read it as a kid, and we used to listen to it like on cassette in the car on, you know, road trips and stuff. It's narrated by the author, who just has the best sort of, you know, an old woman reading you a story kind of voice, and it's just, yeah, this was fantastic to listen to on audiobook, and I read it as a physical copy as well, and yeah, that was my favorite reread. Best audiobook / narration so far. I would have to say Red Clay by Charles B. Fancher, which is narrated by Dion Graham, I think his name is. He is a great narrator, and especially in that book because he does different like voices. I had heard him narrate The Wager by David Grann before, but it's a non-fiction book first of all, but it's also pretty much only men. But in Red Clay there were female characters as well, and they were African Americans, and they just had a lot more flair than the characters in The Wager. And so yeah, he just did that very well, and he is also great at sort of finding a tone of voice for the setting. Like there was very serious topics and horrible situations because it's around the topic of slavery. So of course it's going to be a lot of heaviness, but there was also a lot of humor and love and other things in that story. And I just think that the narration that came across very well in the way that he translated it as well, in some way that I can't explain. And I would also say My Friends by Fredrik Backman, because I listened to that on audiobook as well, and I thought that was really great. And I think she does a great job. It's not as much of a performance, but she's very sort of neutral to listen to, and I always feel like she reads things and like the things that people say, that the characters say in the book, she just reads them in the same sort of melody that I would if I read the words on paper. Because sometimes I hear narrators and they just like say something with a different kind of intonation or whatever, and I just sort of have to correct it in my head. But I just feel like she matches my melody. And also this very like subtle sarcasm and humor that she adds into her voice somehow, so that it sounds funny, even though it's like very deadpan sort of humor, but you can still hear in her voice and the way she narrates that it's supposed to be funny. And yeah, I don't know how she does that, but I think it's great. Best sequel. I haven't read a lot of series this year, or like at all. The only book that is a sequel that I can think of is The Winners by Fredrik Backman, which is the third and final book in the Beartown series. So I'm gonna have to say that one. Favorite new author, debut or new to you? Again, Catherine Chidgey and Mona Awad, I would say are new favorite authors because they are new to me. These are the first books that I have read by them, but I definitely want to read more by them, and I have already picked up the next books that I want to read from them, which is Rouge by Mona Awad and The Book of Guilt by Catherine Chidgey. I would also like to read more from Julia Armfield. I really enjoyed Our Wives Under the Sea, and I would like to try Private Rights as well. A genre you've started exploring or want to? I'm not really sure about this one, but I feel like it's leaning towards the dark kind of genres. I definitely want to read more of like sort of horror thriller-ish, but like I don't think I'm ready for straight up horror, and I think that there are so many different kinds of horror. Like Bunny, I feel like is very, I mean, just look at the cover, it's like bright pink and it's a cute little bunny on it. This was not scary at all for me, and I don't think that I want to necessarily read scary books, but there's a quality to that kind of horror that I really like, and that I think makes the story and the book very engaging and very intriguing to me to read. So yeah, I just want the right amount of horror and the right kind of horror. Yeah, because I don't want to be scared, just a little bit. Ooh, I just want the suspense of it and like the weirdness of it all. I would also like to find more thrillers that are the kind that I like. I feel like there are a lot of these like popcorn kind of thrillers, and I think that I want something with a little bit more depth and darkness and, you know, but not too serious still. I don't really know what it is that I'm looking for until I find it. Pet by Catherine Chigi is classified as a thriller, but it's not like a, you know, your typical sort of crime thriller or domestic thriller. It's, you know, in a school. So yeah, it's different from other thrillers that I've read. And I do have another one. Where's that? The Man Who Lived Underground by Richard Wright, which is also classified as a thriller, but with a lot of like social commentary about race in the US. And so yeah, this is one that I'm very interested in as well. And so yeah, I'm still trying to figure that out, but that's something that I want to keep exploring. Okay, the next section is about lowlights and disappointments. The first question is the most disappointing book you've read. Forgotten on Sunday by Valérie Perron was a very big disappointment because I had hyped it up so much in my head. It's not like a terrible book, it just wasn't what I expected, and so it was disappointing for that reason. I was also kind of disappointed with a couple of new releases. Count My Lies by Sophie Stava was the thriller that I listened to on audiobook, and I was disappointed with that because it was just not very interesting. And then the other one is The Strange Case of Jane O by Karen Thompson Walker, which I thought was great. I was really intrigued and engaged for like 90% of the book, and then the ending just sort of failed me. So yeah, that was disappointing for that reason. A book you DNF'd and why? I think there are quite a few audiobooks that I have started and decided not to continue. One that comes to mind is Dying to Meet You by Sarina Bowen. It was about a woman who was stalking her ex-boyfriend and then found him dead, or like witnessed his murder, and also found out that he had been stalking her too. And I thought all of that sounded very interesting. And I started listening to it, and I didn't make it very far, and so I can't judge the book as a whole. But it was just such a slow start, and I lost my faith in the author. I just felt like, if you can't hook me in this amount of time that I've listened, I don't really trust you to carry the story for the rest of the book either, and like make that engaging and interesting for me, because you have this chance to make a first impression and this is what you do. I don't trust you. Because the start of the book was just like following her on her job and like her work day as an architect, and they were talking about like the walls and stuff. Like it just it just never ended. I don't even know. It was like walls and decorations, and I was like, let's get to the stalking or whatever. I was just immediately bored, and I did not have the patience to wait for it to get better. If you have read that book and it's fantastic, please let me know, because I might be open to trying it again, but like, it would take some convincing. A book I wanted to love but didn't is The Guilt Pill by Saumya Dave. Which is about a woman who seems to have it all but is struggling and feeling like a failure in all aspects of life. And then she comes across a woman with a pill that is supposed to erase female guilt. And I thought that was a very interesting premise that I wanted to read a book about. And so I did. There are a lot of discussions about women in the work life and sort of expectations and, responsibilities and all of that. And there was also some discussions about being an immigrant woman, and just the clash of cultures and things like that. And all of that was great, but I had hoped for it to be more about like the pill itself, and it was said to have these like dire consequences, and I just didn't see any of that. And so I had wanted it to be a little bit more experimental and like pushed it a little bit further. It felt a bit tame. The concept and the issues that it talks about are really important and interesting, but I didn't love it. The next section is emotional impact, and the first question is a book that made me cry. I think that I've cried at quite a few books this year, although not like a lot, but My Friends by Fredrik Backman definitely made me sort of tear up and choke up, or like it just goes back and forth between humor and like heartbreak and like just gut-wrenching things. And that's also going to be my answer for the next question, which is a book that made me laugh out loud. I just felt like I was on, the waves of an ocean and it was just being tossed back and forth between different emotions and just like, tearing up and then laughing and then chuckling and then choking up, and then you're just so like on the edge of all of the emotions all at once reading that. Or like at least that was what it was like for me. It just has this like golden sheen to it. Beartown by the same author is very much like focused on a serious topic, and that has humor as well, but like it's a very sort of cold and heavy kind of book. It's set in winter and things like that, but this one is set in summer, and so it has that kind of like summer evening glow to it, but like on an emotional level. And so that just made me feel all of the emotions. A book that felt like a hug, I'm also going to say My Friends by Fredrik Backman. There was a lot of nostalgia that felt like a hug of like being a teenager and running around with your friends on the summer holidays. And there's also so many characters that you just want to reach out and hug. I would also have to say Ronja Rövardotter by Astrid Lindgren again, because this book is just a big hug. Also a lot of nostalgia for me because I read this as a kid. But I just think it's such a good story. It just has so many good elements, like there's monsters and friendship and family and danger and lovely summer forests, and it's just a big hug. And Astrid Lindgren as a person is also like a big hug. So a quote that's stuck with you. I don't really have a quote like a one-liner that sticks in my head, but I did take a couple of photos of some sort of passages in Disability Visibility that just stood out to me. The first one is about finding a cure for whatever condition this person had. I don't really think that it matters. I will still take a cure if it's presented to me, but I'm too tired of trying to bargain with the universe for some kind of cure. The price is simply too high to live chasing cures, because in doing so, I'm missing living my life. I know only that in chasing to achieve the person I once was, I will miss the person I have become. The next one is about a person who has a prosthetic leg, and it says, I'm told by the technicians to maintain an average amount of walking on a daily basis. Don't go overboard, but don't be lazy either. Stay in the middle. The insurance company could pull my data and decide whether I have used my leg enough to justify the next one. And then there was another essay by Jeremy Woody, who is a deaf man who is or was in prison, and he's writing about his experience at a hearing of some kind, and then also in prison, like in the cell. And the first section says, There was one who was the nice guy, one of the ones who was willing to write things down for us deaf folks. He tried to get them to take the cuffs off me. He wrote, "Guilty or not guilty," but the others would not uncuff me. I wanted to write, "Not guilty." I wanted to ask for an interpreter, but I couldn't. They said, "Okay, you have nothing to say? Guilty." That infuriated me. I started to scream. That was really all I could do. They sent me to the hole, and I cried endlessly. It's hard to describe the fury and anger. Prison is a dangerous place for everyone, but that's especially true for deaf folks. And then the last one, also by Jeremy Woody, says, I met several other deaf people while I was incarcerated, but we were all in separate dorms. I would have liked to meet with them and sign and catch up, but I was isolated. They housed us sometimes with blind folks, which for me made communication impossible. They couldn't see my signs or gestures, and I couldn't hear them. They finally celled me with another deaf inmate for about a year. It was pretty great to be able to communicate with someone. But then he got released and they put me with another blind person. Yeah, especially that essay about being deaf and in prison has really stayed with me. It blows my mind that someone who is deaf can be put in a cell with someone who is blind. That is isolation, and like isolation is something that's being used in prison for like extra punishment within that setting. So if you're there and unable to communicate with anyone, that is also isolation. That just made me really, really sad and really angry, and it really stayed with me. And from that, we're moving on to the section Just for Fun. And the first question is, what's the most beautiful book cover you've seen this year? I think this is a tricky question to answer because there are so many gorgeous book covers, and I really appreciate a good book cover and good design. And I also think that there are a lot of books in, that kind of darker genre that I'm wanting to explore, that really, like the genre and the books themselves really intrigue me, and the book covers also tend to speak to me. They are usually like dark and mysterious and very artsy, and I love them. But I try to look through some of the new releases that I have, talked about in my new releases videos. And I think that Water Moon by Samantha Soto Yambao has a really gorgeous cover. I think it would do very well as a poster on a wall. It's a very magical kind of cover, but very like subtle at the same time, and like very like monochromatic. It's all sort of blue and white and a touch of purple, and I really love that combination. It's very simple and yet has a lot of intrigue about it. And I also really like the cover of Junie by Erin Crosby Eckstein, I think her name is. That just has a lot of gorgeous colors. It's like a summer evening. And yeah, that's just a gorgeous cover, I think. And then there are the other ones, the darker ones. And I especially like the ones with some kind of like botanical or like nature-y kind of art on it, or illustration, or like, like a bouquet of flowers or something. And like it's very like there. And then there's lettering in like very bold colors or neon colors and something like that. And they're like woven into the flowers or whatever. Like Stag Dance by Tori Peters has one of those covers. And I can't think of the other ones that I'm thinking of with the flowers and things. The one that I have on my shelf that I think sort of fits this kind of theme is The Things We Do to Our Friends by Heather Darwent. And this isn't a new book this year, but it's a book that's new to me this year. And it has that similar kind of, like there's a snake and an apple and a hand in the background. And then there's a little bit of like letters woven into it and like a bright yellow, and there's pink, and yeah, just like this kind of aesthetic, but like make it even more art, like traditional art, and then the bold new lettering. I find that really appealing and interesting, and I love it. Okay. The most beautiful new book that I have bought or received. I do have The Wall by Marlene Haushofer, which I think has a very beautiful cover. It's a very simple design, but it's very calm and sort of existential and sort of vast. and yet so simple, and I really love it. And it's also like the book itself is like this little matte thing. It's very slim and it just looks very high quality. I don't know how to explain it. It just feels very good. And then the last question in this section is, what's your favorite reading spot right now? This time of year, and in the past few weeks, my favorite spot has been in the garden at my cabin under our new parasol. I just love sitting there and listening to the birds and reading my book and having a cup of coffee. And then the last section is anticipation and TBR, and sort of looking ahead to the rest of the year. And the first question is, one series you want to finish or start by December. Like I said, I haven't been reading a lot of series this year, and I didn't last year either, but I did start The Shepherd's King. Is that what it's called? One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I read that last year, and so this year I would like to read Two Twisted Crowns, which is the second and last part in that duology. It wasn't my favorite book of all time or anything, but I've heard that the second book is a little bit better. And yeah, I would just like to, for mental purposes, just complete a series. And that's just, a duology. So that seems manageable. And yeah, I do want to know what happens. So that's my answer for that question. A book you need to read before the end of the year. I am not giving up. I am going to read Hours by Philip B. Williams this year. I don't even know what my issue with this book is and why I can't start it, why it's so intimidating. I mean, it is a bit of a longer book, but yeah, still, I am very intrigued to read this. So this is a book that I am going to read, hopefully this summer, but at least by the end of the year. A new released book that you haven't read yet but want to. If you saw the book haul that I did recently, you already know the answer to this question. But I definitely want to read The Book of Guilt by Catherine Chigi. Yeah, this is her new release and I want to read it so bad. I loved Pet by her, and the premise of this book just sounds so intriguing to me, and I really want to read it. And I also really want to read The Garden by Nick Newman. I think this is another very interesting premise. It's said to be sort of reminiscent of Piranesi. It has shades of Shirley Jackson and Susanna Clarke, and I think that sounds amazing. It's about these two elderly sisters who are in a walled garden, and they're following an almanac left by their mother, and then a boy appears and their, reality is shattered. And I just think it sounds like so much fun. And I also got a bunch of books from the library, and I haven't had time to pick them all up, but I will show you the ones that I got. I had requested a bunch of books a while back, like some new releases that I was interested to read that I wanted them to buy. And so I got a new message today saying that they had purchased even more of the new releases that I had suggested. But anyways, the ones that I have picked up are the ones We Love by Anna Snoekstra, which is a sort of family thriller, fundamentally, by Nusayba Yunus, which was nominated for the Women's Prize as well. And I just think this sounds so intriguing and I really want to read it. And then I also have The Stolen Queen by Fiona Davis, which is a historical mystery thriller kind of book. I don't know how I'm going to find the time to get to all of these books, but yeah, there are definitely a lot of new releases that I haven't read yet. Most anticipated release for the second half of the year. The first one is No Friend to This House by Natalie Haynes. And I can't remember what it's about, but I know that it's a story that I am interested in. And I loved Stone Blind by her. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And then Oinka and Braithwaite, who wrote My Sister the Serial Killer, has a new book coming out called Cursed Daughters, and so that's one that I am looking forward to as well. And then there's going to be a sequel to Bunny by Mona Awad called We Love You, Bunny. From what I understand, or I read somewhere, that it's going to be from the bunny's perspective. So that sounds very intriguing to me, and I really want to read it. And then the last question is, what is your reading mood going into the second half of the year? On the one hand, I'm feeling a bit more free and sort of in control of what I'm reading, which feels really nice. I have sort of said no to anything that gives me any sense of obligation, because that just spoils the fun for me. And I also have a big stack of new books that I got recently that I am super excited about and very eager to read. And at the same time, I know there are so many books that I want to read that I am so excited about, and I'm not really spending as much time as I would like at the moment reading the books. And it's not so much that I feel the need to read these books this year, because that's, you know, an accomplishment and I want to reach some goal. It's not that. It's just like there are so many good books and I really want to read them. I want to read them all. I want to read them all right now, and I want to experience them, and I'm just very excited about them. And then I get distracted by other things. Calm and free and a bit of a panic. Let me know if you're doing this tag as well. I would love to watch your video and hear your answers. And if you don't have a channel, I would love to know your answers to any of these questions if you want to share them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Okay.